Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Project Accounting in Excel. The webinar is sponsored by MorphWraps. My name is Stephanie DePaulo, and I will be your moderator for this event. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. I have with me today Bill Jelen. Bill is the host of MrExcel.com and the author of more than 65 books about Microsoft Excel, including Excel Gurus Gone Wild, Pivot Table Data Crunching, and Excel Inside Out. He has made over 80 guest appearances on TV's Call for Help with Leo Laporte and was voted Guest of the Year on Computer America Radio Show. He has produced over 2,400 episodes of his Excel video podcast, Learn Excel from Mr. Excel. Before founding MrExcel.com in 1998, Jelen spent 12 years in the trenches as a financial analyst for the accounting, finance, marketing, and operations departments of a publicly held company. And before we get started, I'd like to review a few items with you. Audio is available by dialing the number provided. If you have any questions, we ask that you reserve them for the end of the webinar using the Q&A panel. And at the conclusion of the webinar, there will be a few survey questions about your webinar experience, and we'd appreciate your participation. Finally, you will receive the slides and recording from today's webinar within the next 24 hours. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or your account manager. As a reminder, you must complete 3 out of our 4 live poll questions during this webinar in order to receive your CPE credit, and Bill will be emailing them to you directly within 1 week. Now, a little bit about us. MorphWraps is a certified Microsoft and Oracle partner, offering 24/7 global support coverage for 400 plus customers and 34,000 plus end users. We offer nearly 30 out-of-the-box wizards built specifically for organizations running on Oracle eBusiness Suite and Oracle Fusion Cloud applications with validated integration and tight security. At MorphWraps, we understand that data is the most important asset to drive business decisions and outcomes, so ensuring integrity is vital. MorphWraps' suite of solutions integrate seamlessly with each other and your Oracle ERP instance, providing up-to-date data when and where you need it within the highest levels of quality. With us, you can eliminate hassle-prone tools, empower end users, and gain trust in your data for whatever business needs arise. Our customers are able to download their data, make necessary and timely changes within a format that makes sense to their user and business, and upload back into Oracle, all within a single Excel spreadsheet. With pre-validation capabilities, you can quickly identify errors and have the ability to resolve them in real time. Our main goal is to improve operational efficiencies, productivity, and accuracy of data for organizations across all industries. Visit us at morphwraps.com to see it for yourself. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Bill.
All right, Stephanie, I am really excited about today's event. Let's see, share screen. Here we are. Click share. All right. Good. So the plan today, we're going to do some project accounting. As I try to build these examples today, it's pretty interesting that project accounting is using a lot of core Excel skills. So even if you're not doing project accounting, hopefully along the way, you're going to learn a lot of cool things that you can do in Excel. Now, this book, Mr. Excel 2022, doesn't specifically deal with project accounting, but some of these techniques that I'm going to use, like the data model for budget versus actual, conditional formatting for the Gantt chart, and things like sharing documents in OneDrive, those are all covered in the book. So I'm going to put over in the chat window. Let's see the chat window. Chat window later. I'll put that in the chat window, and you can download that book. If I can't get it to you, we'll send it out tomorrow along with the workbooks that I used today. All right. So my first example today is what I call budget versus actual. And this is a situation where you have a series of projects and you know what the budget is for the project. Like the project budget is basically one row in Excel, and the actuals that are coming in, you're getting all kinds of expenses and invoices over time, and you're trying to marry those two things up. And I have a great way to do that. You can't just do like a VLOOKUP from one row to a bunch of rows. VLOOKUP only returns one item, and even XLOOKUP could only return the top item or the bottom item. We'd have to switch over to something like SUMIFs or SUMIF or something like that. But I just have a much better way to do that. All right, so we're going to come here to the budget versus actual, and my fictitious Acme Corp has 7, 1, 2, 3, actually 6. Project 6 somehow got canceled. That happens, right? So the project name, material budget, labor budget, and total budget. So this is a really small table with all of our budget information. And I'm going to go to the next worksheet, and you'll see there is just a massive table here. How many rows do I have? Well, let's see, the fast way to see how many rows I have is just select one whole column, look down here for the count. So it looks like 5,333. So minus the heading, 5,332 rows of data. So we have date, vendor, material, labor, total expense. And then I had to tack on project ID, right? That was the trickiest part, taking all of these items and figuring out what project they belong to, right? So I want to create a pivot table that marries this small little data set with project budget with this massive data set with all of the actuals. And in order to do this, this is a graphic from that book, MrExcel 2021. A friend of mine, George Berlin, drew this. And so on the left-hand side, we have, the budget, which is really small. And then on the right-hand side, the actuals, which are just these big, ugly, detailed data sets. And in order to get these two to talk to each other, we have to do something called a joiner table, And so we have our budget table and our actuals table, and we're going to have to create something to act as the intermediary between those tables. Now, the tools I'm going to use today, Microsoft has 2 different names for this. One is the data model, but behind the scenes, it's really called Power Pivot. This debuted back in Excel 2010, and there's so many confusing things with Microsoft. We have Power Pivot, PowerPoint, Power Query, Power BI. Power Pivot is really the one that you hear the least about. It's the earliest. It was the first one that was there, but it has this cool ability to take data on 2 different worksheets and build a single pivot table from that data. The one constraint with Power Pivot, I have to think, is that all of the data has to be formatted as a table. All right, so just select any one cell in your budget table, and here on the Home tab, choose Format as Table. You'll see that that can also be Control-T. They ask you to choose a table format, and the table format doesn't matter at all. It's just that we're creating a table out of that. And be careful, because Microsoft has to name every table, but they don't give it a good name. So out here on Table Design, this is called Table 1. And I really want to rename that, right? So, some people, I don't want to call them nerds or geeky. They'll always prefix their table with TBL. And I'm not that kind of a person, right? I'm just going to call it budget or something like that. So that's my budget table. How about budget table? Budget table. All right. I guess that's almost as nerdy as table, TBL, budget. And then actuals. So this big table here, Control-T, and my table has headers. Right? Oh, look at that. There's 2 extra columns there. I don't know what causes that. Right click, delete those columns. I must have typed a space over there. Who knows? All right, so now this was called, they called this one table 2, of course. Yes, I'll call that my actuals table. My budget table and my actuals table. Unfortunately, because the budget table has each project ID once and the actuals has multiple items, I can't join these together. I can't create a relationship. So I do a tiny bit of pre-work, and that pre-work involves getting a unique list of project IDs. There's lots of ways we could do that. In the old days, we would use an advanced filter, checking the box for unique only. You might use remove duplicates, but if you have the latest and greatest Microsoft 365, this amazing new function called unique, right? So I'll just come back to unique and go to my actuals table and choose all those cells, close paren, and it gives me a list of the unique projects that showed up so far this year. We probably should really make sure that we grab the same thing from the budget table. Like, you want to make sure if it's in either table that is here. And I'm just going to add one extra thing to this table. I'm going to say who the manager is for each of these. So just randomly assign those using the fill handle, right? And then I'll be able to add that manager information into my final pivot table, which I think will be cool. Okay, so we have our report there. I used unique. I need to change those to values. So we'll just copy and paste values. By the way, what is it? There's a new shortcut. There's a new shortcut they just introduced last month for paste values. Will I be able to remember it? Probably not. Let's try a couple of times. So we do Control C, and then is it Control Shift V? Let's try that. Control Shift V. That's it. So check that out. We've never had a good shortcut for paste values. And there's so many different ways to paste values, but they just added Control Shift V. By the way, that trick's not in the book since it just debuted a month ago. And there's a good chance if you're in Microsoft 365 and the semi-annual channel, you don't have it yet. You'll have to wait till July for that to roll out to you or whenever your IT department decides to upgrade. Okay, so we have two tables. Sorry, let's stay on track here. We have two tables, the one called actuals, the actuals table, one that's the budget table. And then this one, this little joiner table, this joiner table is the key to the whole thing. And so my table has headers. See, they got full there because it was a nice small table. So always make sure to check that box. And of course, they call this one table 3. I'm going to call it joiner table. All right. Now, a little bit of work that we're going to do here beforehand. Normally, if we just have one table in Excel, we insert pivot table from that table and everything is great. But instead, we want to get that data into the data model. All right. And right here, there's a Manage Data Model button. When you choose Manage Data Model on the Data tab, they're going to give you this brand new tab called Power Pivot. And on the Power Pivot tab, we have this thing called Add to Data Model. So we're going to take each of our tables here. The budget table, I'll click Add to Data Model. Just be prepared that this can sometimes take 10 or 15 seconds. If you haven't used the data model yet today, they're loading some things in the background, right? So it's not that Excel's crashing, just be prepared that it might take 10 or 15 seconds the first time that you use the data model each day. So we have our budget table, and then here I'm going to add the actuals table, right? And this is pretty cool. It's actually like a second grid back here behind the grid. This is the Power Pivot grid. We don't have to do anything here today. It's just a chance to see these tables. And then finally, the joiner table. We'll click in there and add to data model. All right, so we have three different sheets. All right. Two different ways to set up the relationship between these items. We can come in here to diagram view, which is the nice visual way to do this, or back in Excel, you can do data, and then here under relationships, something called create a new relationship. To be honest, this is what I use all the time. Create a new relationship. It's not visual, right? So we would say that we had an actuals, or let's start with the budget table. It has a field called project ID, and that's related to the joiner table that has a field called project ID. All right. That would create the first relationship, and then we would create the second relationship from actuals. But since we're there, let's just come into Power Pivot, Manage Power Pivot, and I'll show you how cool it is to create this relationship using the diagram view. Now, my friend Rob Colley, Rob has written the best-selling book on Power Pivot. It's funny, I got stumped by Power Pivot yesterday and just talked to Rob on the phone. So shout out to Rob. Because everything I've learned about Power Pivot, I've learned from Rob. And Rob loves to actually rearrange these tables in diagram view. So that way he can keep an eye on what's going on. So we have a budget table on the left, an actuals table on the right. And the thing that's going to talk to both of those is the joiner table in the middle. So he takes the project ID, drags it from the left, and drops it on the project ID field. That creates a relationship, a one-to-many relationship. And then same thing here, the project ID, and drags it over. Okay, so we've now defined to Excel how this works. This is probably one of my favorite things that happened back in Excel 2010 that no one is aware of. So you usually have sheet 1 and sheet 2, and you need to create a pivot table from both of those data sets. You're doing a big VLOOKUP first or something like that. By creating these relationships, you're avoiding all of the lookup hassles, right? It's almost like you're using Microsoft Access. In fact, this diagram view feels a lot like Microsoft Access. All right, so we've created all of our data there, and I'm just going to come to a blank worksheet, completely blank worksheet. And on the Insert tab, I'm going to create a pivot table from the data model, So that's saying those three fields, three tables that we've defined, we're going to use all of those. So check this out. Put it right here on this new worksheet, right on that blank worksheet. And over on the right-hand side, let me bring up the magnifier so we can take a look at this. This is the pivot table fields list. This is all very normal for us. But what is not normal is that they list all of the data on all 3 worksheets, which is pretty cool that we can see that, right? And there's a little, what is that, a greater than sign beside each thing. So if I can open any table and see the values from that table. The key to this whole thing, of course, the actuals number, the total expense actuals is going to come from the actuals table. That makes sense. The budget is going to come from the budget table. But everything that goes in the rows and columns has to come from the joiner table, because the joiner table, that little table that sits in the middle, is the thing that can see both the actuals and budget, right? So I'm going to take the joiner table and we'll add project ID down the left-hand side. And so now for each project, I have the total of the budget and total of expense. I might want to add maybe a slicer based on manager, so I can see just the projects for one manager or the other. That's on pivot table analyze, insert a slicer. And you want to be really careful. Don't choose project ID or manager from the actuals or budget table. You have to go down to the joiner table and say manager. So I get my little slicer there. Let's see, where are we going to put that? I always pay attention to the slicer. And if the names are really short, which in my fake data, the names are always really short, then I can use this 2 columns here and just make it all fit in a really nice small area. So now I can filter the pivot table based on manager, which is cool. All right, so this is all pretty amazing up until this point. We've taken a top level budget and tied it to a bottom up expense. But there's one more amazing thing here. So when I took the budget and expense numbers and dropped them in the values area, I created a calculated field in this pivot table. Now we do that in pivot tables all the time, but it's a very different thing that happened here because I've actually created something that they call, it's a strange name, they call it a measure. A calculated field is called a measure. And if we manage those measures, right, because I just dragged them in there, it doesn't appear, but I can create a new measure, and that new measure is going to be called variance. Will be in the joiner table. We have variance, and that's going to be, I hit the left square bracket, and we want sum of actuals minus, and then another left square bracket, sum of total budget, right? And this is a very amazing formula because it is only going to operate for each row in the pivot table. So in this case, we have 6 projects in a grand total. It's only going to do this calculation 7 times. Regular calculated fields and pivot tables go back to the underlying data. They do a calculation for each row. It's fairly complex. But here, we're actually creating summary level calculations. It's also nice we can specify the format as we're creating it. So we click OK and click close. And now I have a new field here called variance. So that means that 376 was our budget. We're at 393. We're already 16,500 over on this one. And wouldn't it be nice then to see variance percent? All right, so that's another measure that we're going to create. If you don't have the Power Pivot tab displayed all the time, which a lot of people don't, you can just come here to the joiner table, right click and say add measure. That was new in Excel 2016. There was this funny situation back in Excel 2013 and 2016, and that a lot of people didn't have Power Pivot because they weren't at the E3 level that you needed, even though Power Pivot was there behind the scenes. And so this secret little way of right clicking on the table name and saying add measure was a great way of writing your own DAX formulas, even if your company wasn't paying for the E3 level. So I still point that one out because someone might be stuck back in Excel 2016. So the variance percent, and this is so cool. I can reuse that formula I just created, the variance, and let's see, divided by sum of budget. So total budget like that. Check the DAX formula. Good. This one is going to be a number as a percentage. One decimal place. Variance divided by sum of budget. Maybe should I put -1? That way I can see whether we're plus or minus. Click OK. And then choose that field. That's the downside when you right click. So when you right click, you're kind of coming in through the side door, and it doesn't automatically check mark that for you. All right. I shouldn't have done -1 there. I screwed that up. Measures, manage measure, variance percent, edit, take out the -1. So I think click OK, because I already calculated the variance. Yeah. Okay. So there we are. So now we're over 4%. Oh, wow. We're over on all of these. That's so funny. I didn't realize we were over on all of these. I thought there would be a few that we were under budget, but wow, that's the way it goes with projects. Over on all of those. Pressing. Although it's fake data, so I guess I'm not really going to be in trouble. All right, there you go. Okay, so now let's recap what we did there. We started out with the top level budget. We made that into a table and gave it a good name like budget. We started out with a bottom up actuals. We made that into a table and called it actuals. It's important you make it into a table. And then one table to live between the other two. I added in the manager field so that way I could do reporting on it. Made that into a table called joiner. And then the relationships that we created either here on the data tab using relationships or back in the Power Pivot, the manage model and the diagram view, right? So define the relationships. And once you're there, you're home free. You can create your pivot table from the data model, use numbers from the side tables, but use all the text fields from the center table, from the joiner table, and then used a DAX measure, a new measure. DAX stands for data analysis expressions. It's a really powerful formula language. Check out Rob Colley's book, by the way, if you need to learn DAX, or Matt Allington also has great books on DAX. And then created a measure here for variance and a measure for variance percent. All right, there you go. There's 4 CPE questions. This is actually a great time for the first CPE question. Stephanie, if you can launch that one. All right, poll number 1. How do you create a pivot table from multiple sheets? That is A, data merge, B, data model, C, data analysis, or D, data combine. All right, there we are, data model. That's exactly it. 79%. Very, very good. All right. Okay, next up, projecting your forecasted completion date. And this is something that I have found that I have to use all the time. Every once in a while, well, I guess about 65 times in my life, I've had to write a book or update a book, and it requires focus. The only way to write a book is to write something every day. And so this is a tool that I started using to manage my own projects, and it will keep me on track. Right. So we're going to switch here to chart number 2, or workbook number 2. And the first thing that I have for me, books is just simple. It's number of pages, right? So I have some number of pages that have to get written, and there's a deadline. The publisher says that the book needs to be, to us for copy editing by a certain date. So I have a start date that's just this week, like a Monday of this week, and a due date. Now, it's interesting, in most places, you can't just subtract one date from the other because you're not working Saturdays or Sundays, right? And you're not working any holidays. So in this spreadsheet here, I've added a list between now and July 21st. There are 3 company holidays that we won't be working in. I just made that list here, and I'm going to introduce a great new function to you. Normally, what we would just do is subtract the later date minus the earlier date, and it would say we have 102 days between those dates. But that's counting Saturdays and Sundays, and I don't want to be working Saturdays and Sundays, and I don't want to be working the holidays, right? So a beautiful function that's been in Excel Well, ever since Excel 2007. So everyone should have this. And even before Excel 2007, it was in the analysis tool pack add-in. So like going back to Excel 97, we had this function. It's called net work days. And what you do is you give it a start date. So we're starting on April 10th. And then you give it an end date, right? And then you specify your list of company holidays. So those are the holidays that don't count in the total. It's also kind of interesting. Some people have pointed this out to me. Let's just say that you start on Monday and go to Friday. No holidays there, Monday through Friday. If you just subtract Friday minus Monday, it's going to count as 4 days. But with this net work days, they count the first day and they count the last day. So it's a little bit different. And it actually works out great here because I get to write on the first day and I get to write on the last day. And so that tells me that there are 72 work days to get this project done. And then here for me, it's just simple. It's 300 pages that have to be written. So the number of units per day, 300 divided by 72, comes out to just over 4 pages. I can't start writing 4 pages. That will mean that I'll end up way short at the end. But 4 pages. All right, so we have 72 days that we have to chart out here. I always build this nice little table. And so down here, I'll put the numbers 1 to 72. You could just type the 1 and hold down the control key while you drag the fill handle, but I'm going to come into sequence of 72. One of those new functions that we got back in Excel 2019, great way to generate a bunch of days, right? And then our start date here is April 10th. And rather than just add 1, because that would include Saturdays and Sundays, I'm going to use a function related to net work days called workday. Which workday, start at that date, go 1 workday out, and by the way, ignore these holidays. Now this time, because I'm going to copy this formula, I have to press F4, which locks down that part of the formula. That way I'm always pointing at those holidays. Later, in the next example, we're actually going to create a named range for those holidays. And double click to copy that down. So there we have all of our dates. Should go out to July 21st if I did it right. Yep, July 21st, perfect. Okay, great. And then the track. This line, the track line in my chart, is where should I be, right? If I have to write 4.16 pages every day, so it's yesterday's track value plus however many pages I have to write. Again, press F4 on that piece, double click to copy that down. And so that should show the progression. If I just manage to write the same number of pages every day, the entire project from day 1 through day 72, that's where I need to be on track. And then the goal line. The goal line is just simple. It's we're shooting to get to 300. I want that line on the chart. Well, to F4, I forgot the F4 there. The F4 puts the dollar signs in. And then out here in column F is where we write down how many pages we complete each day or how many units of work towards this project we write down, right? And so first day, it's the first day of a new project and I'm really focused. I get those pages done, even round up and get to page 5 and everything is great, because you're setting up the template. Probably took me a fair amount of time to beat the track on that day. And then what happens is I have a whole bunch of emails that came in, right? Because I'm not used to writing yet, and I haven't adjusted to this whole thing. So the next day, things kind of go pretty bad. I write a little bit, but then I get sucked into emails and never get back to writing them. But I'm like, that's okay because I was over yesterday, right? And then day 3, now things are really in trouble because I didn't write at all. Okay, so we have this data. We have date, track, goal, and progress. The progress is going to be this. Let's see. In the simplest terms, we start with the current day's writing plus the previous day's writing. But what happens then is we end up with data, and that 7 all the way down is just going to be a horizontal line in the chart. And that's not what I want to do. I want to be a little bit smarter than that. So we're going to say equal if the length of F19 is greater than 0, then do my little calculation that I just talked about. Otherwise, we're going to put in NA in there. NAs, usually, in VLOOKUP, we hate NAs, right? NAs are super annoying. But in this case, I'm embracing the NA because a chart won't plot an NA value, right? So that line, that progress line, is just going to stop once it encounters the NAs, and we'll create the chart that we want. All right. Now I'm finally at the point where I'm going to create the line chart. For each day, I'm going to have what the track is, how to stay on track, what the goal is, and what the actual progress is. There's a funny bug in Excel that if you have dates along the left-hand side and the heading of date, the chart won't get created right. So you just have to temporarily clear that heading and select this data right here. All right, so we're going to create a line chart from this. There, okay. Let's call this progress towards goal. As I type there, I was looking up in the formula bar. It's frustrating, the chart title. If you want to see as you're typing the chart title, you actually have to select the items in there. And then let's see, this blue line, the track line, I like to change the color of that. So select that line, right click and format data series. This little task pane over here is a little frustrating. The paint colors are in the paint bucket, and I'm going to change the color of that line to, you know, a nice little gray or something like that. The goal, I'm going to make that be green. For me, green is, you know, that's where we're trying to get to. And then we have a really tiny line down here that is really too small to click on. So on the Format tab, I can choose the series progress, and I'm going to make, like, that's the real line. That's the line that's going to be black, right? And so that shows my actual progress towards this goal. And right now it's early and I don't realize that I'm in trouble yet. And you won't believe how many times this has actually happened to me, where I get 3 or 4 days in and I say, it's okay, I'm going to be able to catch up, but you can't catch up, right? So if I right click very carefully on that line and say add trend line, it will take your historical data that we have so far, the first 3 data points, and say, okay, Bill, you keep working at this pace and you're only going to end up at 100 pages. So those 72 days are going to go by. Your publisher's going to be breathing down your neck for the thing to be done, and you're not going to be there. All right, with this line selected, right click, format trend line. I always leave it as dotted because it's not a real line. It's not anything that's actually happened, but I always change that to red, right? And this just sits out there. Every day I log the progress towards the goal. And, you know, so this tells me, you know, I'm in trouble, right? So I come back and say, all right, well, let's do another 5, right? And even if I manage to do 5 today, the red line doesn't get me there. It only gets me to about 205 pages. So if I manage to put together a string of 5s, you know, then, you know, I'm finally getting to the point where the red line is starting to get above. But, you know, it's one of those things where if you start out kind of slow, and you put together a whole bunch of days where you're in trouble, then you're really going to have to convince the red line. We personify that red line, that you are capable of coming back in and doing a lot more than you needed to do until you get above the line. It's amazing, this red line, how much of a motivator that is. You know, even from just 3 or 4 data points at the beginning, it'll just say, you know, you're not working at a pace to actually finish this project on pace. And of course, then, you know, if we manage to actually get up here and hit the project a week before the deadline, that's a beautiful thing. All right, CP question number 2, Stephanie, if we can put that one up. How do you add that forecast to a chart? Is it called insert forecast? Is it right click add trend line? Is it right click add red line? Or do you use the line st function? Some people call it the linest function. All right, add trend line, perfect. That is it, that's it exactly. Okay, next up, a Gantt chart in Excel. There's all kinds of great tools for this. It frustrates me. I pay a lot of money for Office, like the E3 level of Office, but they don't give me Visio. Like Visio is they treat it like it's gold. You can't get a Visio in any Office subscription that I see. So I don't have any tools that will actually create Gantt charts for me. But I hack one together here in Excel. Right. So here's what I have. I have a project, the Megalopolis Corp, big project here with a whole bunch of steps down the left-hand side. So step 1 through step 33. And of course, you're probably going to have real names there of things that have to happen. And for each item, how many days it's going to take. So that's my column B. Step 5 is going to take 7 days. Step 7 is going to take 4 days. And then, some steps can't begin until another step is completed, right? So like here, step 2 can't happen until after step 1 is done. But step 6 is independent. Like as soon as we start the next day, you can start step 6. Step 7 is based on step 5. It's just a nice little dependency chart here on the left-hand side. And I'm going to start yesterday, so equal today minus 1. Today's April 12th, obviously. And a couple of formulas that we're going to use here. For my start, I just want the end date to be a single day. So we're starting on the 11th. That way, anything that starts after the start will start essentially on the 12th. Okay, I'm going to use the workday function that we already used once before, but in this case, I'm going to use it a lot. And so what I did is I inserted an extra sheet back here, and I want to show you an amazing way to create a named range that will grow. Because right now I have the holidays for 2023, and this project should be done in December 2023, but we know it's not. There's a good chance it's just going to run late, right? And we're going to go into 2024, and I'll be adding more holidays later to this, right? So I have a simple little table back here, not a table, a range, with the heading of holidays and what the dates are. And I'm going to make this into a table, format as table, choose any formatting, it doesn't matter, click OK, right? And I'm even going to leave it as table 2. I'm not going to have to rename it. But then here's an amazing trick. Now that I have that table, I'm going to name this range. And I'll name this range as holidays. And this is a beautiful way to create a dynamic, expanding named range. In the past, there was a horrible trick to do this using the offset function. And I had to look it up on YouTube every single time, even if it was my own video on YouTube, because it's something I did once every 5 years. Once I learned this trick, actually at an Excel conference in Lucerne, Switzerland, it was a conference where they were speaking German, and I was still able to see this trick and how they did it. And I was like, that's just amazing. And I don't speak any German, but I saw them do it. I was like, oh my gosh, that is such an easier way to create an expanding named range instead of having to use the offset function. And watch what happens. Sorry, let's make this bigger. Like right there, that is the end of table marker. When I get a new holiday, 1/1/2024, the end of table marker moves, and now that named range includes that extra row. Right? Just a beautiful, beautiful thing. All right. So our start date. Our start date for step 1 says we're going to start after the end date for the item called start. Right? So I'm going to use a VLOOKUP here. VLOOKUP. I want to go look up that word start in a very strange lookup table. The lookup table is going to be these items. And I want the 5th cell, so comma 5, comma false. But that A3 to E4 also needs to be an expanding range, right? It's always going to start in A3, so I can click on A3 and press the F4 key to lock that down. But the E4 portion of it, the E is fine. It's always going to go through E, but the 4 is going to move. So I'm looking at all of the rows above the current row. Otherwise, we get a circular reference here. So that's the start date is showing me the end date of the previous step. And then to get to the next workday, I use the workday function. So starting from that day, comma 1, and ignoring holidays. And then the end date is going to be whatever the start date is, plus the number of days that it's going to take. Nope, that's not going to work. I was just about to include holidays. Look at me, equal workday. I got lazy there. Start from the start date, go out this many days, and make sure to include the holidays. See, they even, like, as soon as I start to type HOL, it actually is something I can just tab. It shows up in the autocomplete because it's a named range. So there we go. We have our start date and end date, right? So now this is mapping out for each project, when it starts, when it ends. You know, this is best case, like this is how we think it's all going to go down. But the beautiful thing is, as we adjust, those formulas will allow it to adjust as well. So I can see that we're going from April 11th to October 10th. Up here, I put April 11th, and that started out as a short date, but I didn't want to take up that much space, right? So a couple of things I do here on this start date. Go into Format Cells, and in the Number tab, there's something that gives me 314. Is that it? Yeah, that must be it. So that's month, comma, month/day. And then on the Alignment tab, I'm going to take the text and turn the text sideways like that, right? And that will allow me to change that column width to about 3 or something like that. That formatting over. And now I just need all of the days going across, all of the work days till the end of our project. So equal work day from that date, 1 day, ignore any holidays. And I need to copy this to the right. I've already put a marker out there at the end, so I'm just going to Control-Shift-Right and Control-R for copyright. Wow, look at that. We have some hashtags, hash signs, because it wasn't tall enough in this case because I turned the data sideways. All right, so there we go. We have our dates across the top, all the projects down the side. And now we get to fill in which dates are used where. This is the one piece. I have to admit that this formula right here in F4 is a formula that I still go back to YouTube every single time to get this formula down. We need to say for each of these cells, is the date above us up here in row 3 between the start date or the end date? If it is, we want to put a 1 in there, otherwise a 0. So the AND function, we're checking to see if the date in F3 is greater than or equal to the start date. And then the other test is F3, this date, less than or equal to the end date. So I'm going to copy that whole thing right into this cell. And I should see a 1 there. And as I copy to the right, a bunch of zeros as I copy down. This project right here, you can picture where those ones are, right? I always build the formula in the grid first, even though we're going to use conditional formatting to do this, right? So just building the formula in the grid allows you to debug the formula. It allows you to make sure that it's going to work. There's so many times when you try and go directly into conditional formatting and build the formula there, the formula editor there is not friendly. If something's wrong, you'll never be able to figure out what's going wrong. So I always build the formula here and then very carefully copy the formula from the formula bar. I don't want to just copy that cell. Copying the cell won't work. I actually have to go and get the characters from the formula bar, Control-C. And then starting from that top left corner cell in F4, we'll choose all of this data. There's no good shortcut key for this. I've tried starting at the bottom right-hand corner, but then the conditional formatting just doesn't work. All right, so go out to the end. There we are. Oh, too far. Right there. All right, now here's our old friend, conditional formatting. This goes all the way back to Excel 97, although it's changed a little bit. Under conditional formatting, we're going to create a new rule. We're going to use a formula to determine which cells to format, and I'll paste in that formula. I just have a little tip for anyone who's ever worked in this formula editor here. It is so maddening because if you discover a mistake and you try and press the left arrow key 5 times to go back to the mistake, Excel starts inserting cell references for you. And if that ever happens to you, you just need to press the F2 key. The F2 key toggles between enter mode and edit mode down here in the lower left-hand corner. I can't tell you how many times I've been so upset with this formula editor. And once I learned the F2 trick just says stop inserting cell references here and let me move left and right. Right. Look at that. Being able to move left and right is just an amazing thing. So a little tip there for anyone who uses this conditional formatting. And then we'll choose a little bit of fill there, a nice little orange color. Click OK. Click OK. And there is our Gantt chart. Those are the 1s and 0s that we added initially just to test the formula. We don't need those, right? So we have our we have our low-tech Gantt chart there. And Excel is trying to zoom in and zoom out because there's a lot of conditional formatting going on there. But that is it. All right, Stephanie, let's put up question number 3. Who invented the Gantt charts? You'll actually know this one because is it A, Frank Gannett, the owner of USA Today newspapers, B, Alonzo Church, C, Henry Lawrence Gantt, or Bill Gates? Just take a guess. I didn't actually cover it, but I think you can figure it out. There we are, Henry Lawrence Gantt. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Next up, we're talking about, let's go back to the agenda here. Store your team task list in OneDrive so the entire team can easily access the report and use Excel Sheet View to see just their tasks, also new threaded comments. This is an amazing new set of functionality that not a lot of people have started to embrace yet. But if you're all working at the same company and you're sharing the same workbook, it works fairly amazing. This workbook is called Sheet View for Project, and I have it saved locally on my hard drive, which means that none of these collaboration tools are going to work. So you have to go and save it to your company OneDrive. So File, Save As. Over here on the left-hand side, we have a couple of different OneDrive accounts. I'm going to use this one for Mrs. Excel, and we'll give it the same name, Sheet View for Project, click Save. By saving this document to the OneDrive, I'm enabling multiple people to be able to access the document at the same time. You want to pay attention here on the left-hand side of the quick access toolbar, this auto save functionality. This is only available once you save to the OneDrive, but if you're going to be collaborating with other people, this is a great time to turn that on. That means that as you make a change to this date, let's say, that change will be communicated to everyone else who's working in the workbook at the same time. To share with your coworkers, you come up here to the Share tab in the top right, and we're going to share. And if everything is set up right at your company, you can just start to type people. So like I can share with Zeke. There, great. How about Bill at Jelen.on.microsoft.com. Yeah, there we are. And click send. Right, and we can add multiple people on there. Now, it'd be really great if you could see both computers at the same time, but you can't. So let's try and simulate having 2 people working at the same time. I'm going to do that by opening in Excel Online. This is that version of Excel. If you happen to be, at someone's computer that doesn't have Excel, you could probably figure this out. So let's see, why is it not there? A few more files. That's so weird. Okay, well, we're just gonna make it all work right here using this one thing. All right, the very first time I tried this, and I have to tell you, I'm an early adopter. It was 7 or 8 years ago that I sent this project list out, right? And it was just me and a guy named Scott who worked here. And I was so flummoxed because the very first thing that Scott did is like, I don't need to see any of Bill's data. I just want it to go away. And so he came here to data and then filtered to only his items like this, right? And when he filtered, that filtered my copy of the data as well. And it was just, a terrible, terrible thing that happened, because there was no way for me to work in the workbook anymore. And we just abandoned it within an hour of trying it. But what they've done at Microsoft is they've given us a new set of tools now back here on the view tab, and this is called sheet view. So you're going to be working with various people who are going to be filtering their data, maybe even sorting their data, and you don't want to see their changes, right? So we have this sheet view back here. It's only enabled, in other words, not grayed out, if it is a workbook that's saved to OneDrive. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new view, and they call it temporary view, and I'm going to call this See All Records. Why am I putting underscores in there? I think we're allowed to have spaces. In fact, here, let's just do it. See all. Okay. And I'll finish that name. All right. So I've created a view called See All. And then I'll come in, let's say that I'm Andy and I want to see just Andy. I'm going to create a new view before I do any filtering. That new view, this is going to be called the Andy view. And then once Andy Records is displayed, I choose just Andy from the list. Click OK. Right. So now I have a way to very easily switch back and forth between See All and Andy. Right. And then from See All, let's create another new one. This will be my managers. I will create a new item here called Mary Ellen View. And Mary Ellen will go to a different column and choose just Mary Ellen. So we uncheck Michael, click OK. Right. So now we have a third view, right? Mary Ellen can see just hers. And maybe she wants it sorted alphabetically. So data A to Z. Right. So what just happened there is kind of incredible. Because for me, or for Mary Ellen, it's on row 10. Step 5 is on row 10. But on the view tab, when I switch to Andy Records, that is like somewhere between, I don't know, well, who knows where it is. And actually, see, that should be sorted by this. I'm not sure if we just got hit by a bug there or not. We'll have to go back and check the recording. All right. But setting up these views is the way for multiple people on the team to work together and not drive each other crazy. Normally, when you start to filter or sort, they're going to say, hey, do you want to do this to everyone or just only you, right? And if you say only me, you're essentially creating a new view. If everyone was working on Excel online, then this all just works perfectly. The hassle is when some of us are working in Windows, and in reality, we're all working in Windows, then some little bugs come in. The need to create the See All before anyone starts creating their own views, that's unique to Windows, right? But if you do that, then things will just work out much better. All right, Stephanie, let's do our fourth question here about how we can have multiple filters in a shared workbook. Is it that we're creating sheet view, filter view, custom view, or view master? And then after this question, sheet view, perfect. That's great. All right. After this question, just one tiny little quick set of tips here for keeping track of a shared project list in Excel. Excel is just great for keeping lists. And I keep to-do lists all the time. I just have a to-do list perpetually running. I want to know when things got done. That way I can go back and look at any point in the past. Some great shortcut keys here. One of them, like currently it's 12:55 p.m. here on the East Coast. So Control-Shift: will put in the current time. To get the current date, just unshift that. So Control semicolon, like that, gets me April 12th. All right. And then this amazing trick that doesn't look like it should work, but it does, is you press Control-Shift: and then Control semicolon. That looks horrible, but when you press Enter, it actually does the right thing, right? So you can start using that Control-Shift: Control semicolon to mark as things get done. Control-Shift: Control semicolon, Control-Shift: Control semicolon. And I even cross them out. So Control 5 for strike through. Isn't that a weird shortcut? Why is it Control 5? it turns out, if you remember back in the days when you used to make a little tick mark, so you're taking inventory and you're counting things and you're using the vertical bar. So shift, like that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. It's the 5th one that crosses the others out. So that's how you remember control 5 for strike through. So this is beautiful. You have your list. You can just sort by time done, data, A to Z, like that. And all of the things that are already done go up to the top of the list. I keep these running for 15, 16, 17 months. I have a to-do list with everything that's ever happened here in the last 17 months. And before that, I have multiple files. I guess I try and keep one every year, but it probably doesn't work out really well. So just a great way for everyone to know what's coming up, what's due. I did a couple of cool tricks here with looking at the due date out there and home. Conditional formatting. Let's just take a look at these rules. I set up 2 rules. Network days from today, if it's equal to 1, then I turn it red. That means it's due today. And if network days from today is equal to 2, then I turn it yellow. So I can see things that are due today or due tomorrow. You could go crazy with that and add day 3, day 4, and day 5, and so on. And then even just here, turn on the filters. So data, filter, and filter just things in your group if you needed to do something like that. And so it's Excel is great at pivot tables, but it's also great at just keeping simple little lists of open projects, open steps, history of what's been going on. Probably it's the one Excel file that I open every single day of that I'm at work, because I'm always keeping track of what needs to happen, things like that. All right, there we go. So there's a lot of project accounting type things, but even if you're not in project management, hopefully you learned a lot of cool little tricks and hacks and techniques in Excel. So yeah, Stephanie, thanks for inviting me here today, and thanks to everyone for signing in.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate your time as always. Everyone, this does conclude our webinar. I did receive some inquiries about the polls, so I will circle back with those that had reached out and said that they had issues completing the poll questions. As a reminder, we will send a recording of the webinar tomorrow, along with the follow-up materials, including Bill's workbook, which was also a big request item. So thank you for your time. Please participate in the survey once this is ended, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thanks.